Today we're going to be looking again at factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. This picture was taken at the City Museum in St. Louis. If you've never been, I highly recommend it. This is some of their their outdoor features. They have a couple of airplanes and a school bus suspended in air, and there's lots of tunnels that you can climb around to get to them. We're first going to look at the 7 steps in the 7-step method. I would highly recommend writing these down. So factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. Step 1, factor out the monomial, if one exists. Step 2, multiply a and c together. Step 3, find the factors of a and c that add to b. Step 4, rewrite your trinomial with the factors that you just found from step 3 as the middle term. Step 5, group the last 2 terms and the first 2 terms. This is just done with parentheses. Make sure you are adding between. Step 6, factor out the monomial from each set of parentheses. And step 7, factor the common parenthesis and write the remaining as a binomial. Now, there's a lot of steps, and this sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is, but once we try it, it's not going to be too terribly bad. Example 1, we're factoring 4x squared minus 9x plus 5. So I've got this in split screen mode so we can look at the steps and we can look at the individual problem. So our first step is to factor out the monomial, and that's if one exists. Well, for this particular problem, one doesn't exist. 4x squared, 9x, and 5 have no terms in common. So it's just going to stay 4x squared plus 9x plus minus 9x plus 5. So step 1 is done. Step 2, we're going to multiply a and c together. So I'm going to take 4 and 5 and multiply those together to get 20 for step 2. Not too hard so far. Step 3, we need to find factors of 20 that add to negative 9. For this, you can kind of do a little bit of an X method in the middle. Be careful that you don't try to keep your factors as your final answer. So I want factors of positive 20 that add to a negative 9. Well, that's not going to be too bad. That's just going to be a negative 4 and a negative 5. And it doesn't matter which order we put those in. So hey, step 2 and step 3 are done now. Step 4, we're going to rewrite our trinomial with those factors as the middle term. So I'm going to have 4x squared. Instead of putting minus 9x, I'm going to put minus 5x minus 4 plus 5. So all I did in this case was to take that middle term, which is a negative 9x, and split it into negative, oops, forgot my x. Split it into negative 5x and a negative 4x. It still would simplify to the exact same polynomial, the exact same trinomial. So step 4 is done. Look at that, hardly any work shown, and step 4 is already done. Step 5, group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms and add between. This just means put in parentheses. So I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2 terms and parentheses around the last 2 terms, and make sure I'm adding between them. So step 5 is done. Step 6, factor the monomial from each parenthesis. Sometimes your monomial is just 1. We'll have to see what it turns into in this case. So let's see, between 4x squared and negative 5x, well, they both have an x in common. So I'm going to factor out x, so that leaves me with 4x minus 5. Then the second group, you always want your lead coefficient to be positive. So since that's a negative in there, I'm going to pull out a -1. So when I pull out a -1, that leaves me with the opposite of -4x is a positive 4x. The opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. So for step 6, I've got x times 4x minus 5 plus -1 times 4x minus 5. Finally, step 7, we're going to factor out the common parenthesis and write the remaining as a binomial. Hey, not sure if you noticed, but look at our parentheses. If you've done this correctly, you should have the same thing inside your parentheses. So, for example, if I had something like, let's say, 2x, let's do x times 2 plus -1 times 2. I could go ahead and pull that 2 out front and make that 2 times x minus 1. We're essentially doing the same thing here, but instead of pulling out a 2, I'm pulling out a 4x minus 5. So that 4x minus 5 is going to come out front. And we're going to write what we have left over. What we have left over is going to be x minus 1. And that's the 7-step method. We have 4x minus 5 times x minus 1 as our final answer. Your turn, give this one a try. 3z squared plus z minus 14. Make sure you are going through all your steps. Pause your video at this time. Between steps 6 and 7, did you have the same thing in your parentheses? If you did, keep going. If you didn't, stop and go back and see if you've done it correctly. Your final answer should be 3z plus 7 times z minus 2. It's okay if you have your z minus 2 first. It won't make a difference in the answer. This stuff's pretty hard, so if you got this question correct, give yourself a giant smiley face. Like ear to ear grin. Big teeth. Because the smiley face is very, very proud of you for getting it correct on the very first try. If you didn't get it correct on the first try, never fear, this is some hard stuff. So go back and try it again. Watch the example and see if you can see where you made your mistake. I would say it possibly could be from this -14. Make sure your factors of -42 add to a +1. Your homework for tonight. Redo the 2 problems that you did with the guess and check method from Thursday and use the 7-step method this time. Make sure you show your work. It's okay if you work together, but each individual student will need to turn in their own product. Have a great day.